Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic comic book creator interview. It's your Cape Crusader Cody, and we're keeping it geekly with our awesome guest, Tad Stones. We're here to break down Darkwing Duck and everything in between. I was telling you backstage, I was born 89, so I grew up in the prime of Darkwing Duck. 91 episodes across, 3 seasons from 91 to 92?
Yeah.
How are you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing good. Yeah, Darkwing, actually, people break it down to 3 seasons. For us, it was basically 2 seasons because we put out, originally the business plan was just to do 65 episodes. Because they figured they gave you 13 weeks, 5 days a week, and they could just rerun those forever. That's how the plan was supposed to work. But then ABC wanted 13 episodes, so we let them have some of the ones we had done, did 13 more, and then they wanted a second season. So that's why, we ended up doing 91 episodes. So it was a different business plan than something like SpongeBob, which is popular. So they say, well, let's keep doing them, So anyway, it was a huge amount of fun. It was nice, certainly when we did it. And then, I pitched some more original stuff. But by that time, because I started in feature animation, they said, well, we have this little project called Aladdin. And went on to Aladdin, did the first home videos, then went on to Hercules and Buzz Lightyear Star Command, a little bit of Atlantis, and then out the door and did a couple of Hellboy movies.
Yeah, Hellboy as well as Turok too. So I just hitting every staple of my childhood. I remember countless hours on the N64, slaying away dinosaurs and everything in between. How did this all happen? Like, what inspired you to become a creator?
Well, my dad had wanted to be a newspaper cartoonist. He was like a cartoonist in college. This is back, he graduated basically in the Depression. So it was less about following your dream and just putting food on the table. He ended up in advertising, and he didn't. And, it was a different sensibility. It wasn't I'm going to work 10 hours a night after my job to, get into newspapers or whatever. So he never did that. But I grew up with all sorts of art books and books specifically on cartooning and some books in animation. So that was always part of it. People always wondered, or I see guys quoted saying, I never realized that there were people who made these TV shows or how they made comics. Well, I grew up with I watched the Dick Van Dyke Show, so I knew there were writers writing TV. And in comic strips, I had the famous artist cartoonist course, which were guys like Milt Caniff and Al Cap, and who had done these classic comic strips. And, those are my storybooks growing up. Then my dad, bought the Art of Animation book at Disneyland in one of our visits, and they basically told you how a feature film was made in every single step, and the guys in the pictures were veterans I ended up working with when I finally started at Disney.
Such a full circle story too, to get that book from Disney, How to Draw Disney, and then to end up working for Disney. And I mean, Darkwing Duck itself is such a staple. I feel like if they're over 30, they had to have seen it. They've at least had to have quoted it, right? I mean, how did Darkwing Duck come about for you?
I was actually ordered to do a show called Double O Duck by Jeffrey Katzenberg, who then left Disney and went on to found DreamWorks. Anyway, and Jeffrey they liked shows with names that they thought were intriguing enough that would bring in a few extra people to watch, a few extra viewers. And then it was up to you, of course, to deliver a show that would keep those viewers. So he thought the name Double O Duck was great. I assume he saw it on a list of DuckTales episode titles, because we had done an episode of DuckTales that had Launchpad. And when he brought it up, he specifically said, no, it can't be Launchpad. The whole point is to create a new show with a new lead to, create a whole new cast of characters. I wasn't super excited about it because it felt like James Bond parody. And in essence, that's kind of what I pitched. But his reaction was basically, this is just like a James Bond parody. There's no Disney heart to it. So we went back into it, and this time I had to take it seriously, which I should have done, obviously, the first time through. We had drawn some original artwork, was just a generic Disney duck. In other words, kind of a Donald in a white tuxedo, but he was wearing a mask and a cape and a small hat. And luckily, a lot of our staff writers and story editors at the time were on term contracts, not a specific show, meaning if you needed help on something, you could call them in to a conference room and start batting around ideas. And one of the story editors, Dwayne Capizzi, who had done Alf and went on to do Jackie Chan Adventures and Men in Black, and I think now he's doing a Transformers series. Dwayne looked at the art and he said, with the tuxedo and the cape, this looks more like a pulp hero than a spy. He said, like the Shadow or the Green Hornet. And that was like a spark in my brain, because I love that stuff. I mean, it was before my time, but I had certainly heard tapes of the Shadow, and I certainly, I knew the weed of crime bears bitter fruit. What evil lurks in the hearts of men? That kind of thing that he would say in every episode. That stuck with me. So that gave us a different template, in that I knew Doc Savage had a whole team with him, like a chemical engineer and an electrical engineer, an engineer, transportation guy, communication guys, and they all had eccentric personalities. One guy looked like an ape, and he was teamed up with this prissy Englishman. Anyway, I thought that gives us a different template instead of, Q and the usual Bond stuff. And Launchpad was kind of always in the team, just because it was like having a named guest star, character actor. And he could be our transportation guy. But the show didn't really click until we added Goslin. That gave us the heart and the big complication to his life, that he can't be this suave super spy when this little girl, is tagging along with her, and she's not supposed to. And I kind of patterned her on Calvin of Calvin and Hobbes. That's how wild I wanted her to be. Anyway, we generally had this huge team that we kept paring down because there's too many characters to put in an episode. You couldn't give each a line and you'd be out of time anyway. And a lot of them seemed to be based at the headquarters. So it was like, well, when do we get to the actual mission, whatever it was? Anyway, we finally got it down to Darkwing, Goslin, and Launchpad, since we knew, we wanted vehicles, and we specifically wanted a plane, because this is when it started morphing my mind toward the Silver Age of comics, which were the comics I grew up with when I was the youngest, like in my single-digit years. Also, conveniently, Disney loved the show. They put it out there. They did double-page ads, and it's a 00 Duck, and the people who owned the rights to 007 said, you can't do that. They had let slip things like individual episodes. Everybody had done, James Bond parodies, and and they would let all that slide. But when they're still trying to re-energize the Bond movies, and here's this double-page ad of supposedly a major show from Disney called 00 Duck, making fun of their franchise, they felt. It's like they said, no, you can't do that. So we needed a new name. It so happened that we had a contest to get the new name. And it so happened it was Alan Burnett who came up with the name Darkwing, which I thought was perfect, because I said, that's what the character thinks he is. That's how cool he thinks he is. I'm going to put Duck at it because that sounds sillier and that's closer to the reality. And Alan, if people don't recognize his name, was at Disney for a while and then left to Warner Brothers to do the animated adventures of Batman with Bruce Timm.
Wow.
And Alan stayed, I think, at Warner Brothers, specifically watching over all the superhero stuff in addition to regular shows until he retired. So we, would coyly say that, we warmed him up for the Dark Knight by letting him work on the Duck Knight.
Yeah. That's so cool.
And by the way, everybody, because there was money as a reward in this contest, everybody submitted names. And it wasn't like, oh, that's the one we liked out of the top 5. It was like, no, it was Darkwing and a bunch of trash that there was no way we were going to use. So thank God for Alan. Anyway, that gave me the mental permission to we kept the spy stuff in because in my mind, that stuff funded all his vehicles and things.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, now I was in the Silver Age, comics had less continuity and outrageous visuals and covers and all that. And of course, Batman had a bat plane and a bat boat and a bat cycle and all those things. And they all had his face on them, hence what Darkwing has. And the Thunderquack was, Launchpad's plane that he built because he was such a fan. And in our show, nobody really knew who Darkwing was. They just thought he was a crazy guy if they knew anything about him. And we gave him a Judge Dredd type motorcycle, the rat catcher. And he actually was supposed to have a boat. And that's why St. Bernard in the visuals has this big river going around it, because that's so he could use the boat. But I don't think we ever used it. I think it was going to be called, I believe, the Wave Shredder. But I don't even think we got a design, because I don't remember a boat with a big duck beak.
That had to have been... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that put us firmly in the Silver Age, the time when Jimmy Olsen would turn into a giant turtle boy and everybody would evolve into a superhuman with a giant light bulb head kind of thing.
That had to have been so much fun to dive into this world with so many unique designs and animations and villains and heroes. I mean, I remember Gizmo Duck. That was one of my favorite. Like seeing the robot suit and everything, and then Negaduck as well. How evil he was. Where did you draw some of the inspirations for those characters? Well,
Gizmo Duck I pitched as RoboDuck for a second season of DuckTales, and they got it. That was before Rescue Rangers. I pitched that. In fact, it was the same meeting that I pitched Rescue Rangers to Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg. But it was just the previous, it wasn't being a genius. It was a previous summer RoboCop had been a huge hit. So I just drew the initial image and said, this is, Fenton Crackshell, RoboDuck. And they had it. They just loved it at that. He was really developed more, in the episodes by Ken Kuntz, David Wiemers, who was a writing team at the time, who helped start DuckTales too. Anyway, they made the most of him and really gave him that he lived with his mother and all that. But the initial drawing, basically the unicycle suit and his secret identity name I came up with. But again, it was just, I was looking for, they want a new character for DuckTales just for hype, as opposed to just saying, and we're doing more episodes of DuckTales. So there was the RoboDuck. I did a caveman kid I called Bubba Duck who survived. I also pitched an alien duck that they didn't like, so he was never done. Didn't even have a name, as I recall. So he was a natural to bring into Darkwing's world, because Darkwing was this Batman, this unappreciated Batman, and RoboDuck, who wanted fame, he wanted glory, and Gizmo Duck was Superman in that, he got all the glory. He got the key to the city. Everybody loved him as a hero. So bring him into the show with Darkwing's ego and into the Justice Ducks was a perfect, comedic foil. So that was great, and then I plumbed all those memories of mine to come up with, villains and stuff like that. And then I had a wonderful staff who would then, I'd say, I'm kind of seeing this, but the first writers on each of those characters really had a big hand in, shaping, whether it was Megavolt or Morgana Macabre or any of those people,
That is so awesome. We have some hype in chat. We have Manuel Mangus. Greetings from Russia. Darkwing Duck was very popular in our country. Welcome to the stream. Nine Realms Publishing. What's up, people? Let's get dangerous. And Farius, one up. Great and classic show. Absolutely. We were talking earlier just how this was such a staple, especially if you're 30. If your back hurts right now, you've probably watched and loved this show. And it's phenomenal that Dynamite Entertainment is collecting it. A crap load of issues, guys. Be sure to check out the Kickstarter link right here. We're going to be pulling this up actually right now. So let's go ahead and head over to Kickstarter and see what all the hype is about. Is this your first time kind of being involved with the Kickstarter campaign?
Yeah, let me think now before I say that. I'm pretty sure, certainly to this extent. They let me know what was going on, excuse me. And I started working with Dynamite to do some covers for them. And they said, okay, this is what we've got coming up. And what's fun is they've got one volume that's printing out of print stuff, the original Darkwing comics. And then more fascinating for me is there's a 10 issue, I guess it was a Marvel series of Darkwing Duck that I didn't even know existed at the time, because I was in Agrabah spitting up sand with Iago and Abu and Genie and Aladdin and Jasmine. So that was, and I heard more about it that, again, this, I haven't seen them, but someone told me, said, no, there's 3 issues where they have Darkwing living in a human world. It's like, there were cartoons you could watch to figure that out more. So evidently they're not even dog noses. They're just out and out. He's living in the human world, a la Howard the Duck kind of thing. And then of course they do. Amanda Dibert did the Darkwing series, and so they collect all that in another volume. And then Jeff Parker and Roger Langridge. Jeff did the and is continuing right now doing the Negaduck spinoff, and Roger's doing the Justice Ducks. Each of them brings something different, and also the Negaduck and Justice Ducks are collected in the 3rd volume. All the Darkwings are in the 2nd volume, and the reprint stuff's in that 1st one. And each of those writers brought different things to, and kind of slightly changed the Darkwing universe to make it different for comics. And I mean, Amanda specifically did the character Morgana Macabre, this supernatural, like Miss Morticia Adams type character perfectly. In fact, better than some of the episodes we did, and that she should have been done correctly. She's a very strong individual, kind of like Catwoman, Darkwing's Catwoman, as opposed to, in terms of kind of a criminal, certainly a strong woman, except in the supernatural realm. And then Jeff, what he did with Negaduck, we kept Negaduck pretty one note. I mean, he was just, in any situation, he was a jerk. I always say, given it a choice, he'll always choose the chainsaw. What Jeff did is he put, since he is a reflection of Darkwing, he put more of Darkwing's personality in Negaduck. So he played up Negaduck's ego more, and it's just fun seeing that dark reflection. It wasn't one note. It wasn't just that this guy's good and this guy's mean. It was like, oh no, he's mean, but he worries about his ego and all of that. And then what Roger did with Justice Ducks, it's possibly my favorite comic of the 3, in that it's the closest, for me anyway, to a classic Donald Duck or Uncle Scrooge comic. It's like a Carl Barks touch, where you get into the adventure in like a page and a half, and then you're off and running. There are jokes packed in every page. I mean, Roger, it's just amazing that way. And he made little changes that made sense in that Neptunia always had a real strong, kind of irritating personality. He made her the natural leader of the group, which solved the Aquaman problem of, what if you have an adventure that's not near the ocean or a river or something? And he played down Darkwing's, they all kind of play down Darkwing's ego a bit and have him recognized a little more like a hero in Saint Canard, which keeps them from doing the repetition of the stories, as much as, they avoided that trap when it comes into print. Earlier runs really made Darkwing different by putting in a real heavy continuity, which makes it feel like a modern comic. What Dynamite has done is a different thing. There's some continuity, but like, especially in Justice Ducks, most of those are standalone issues, which is, again, what I grew up with, what Darkwing was based on.
Yeah.
They've just done a fantastic job. So this collection, in addition to the books, has all sorts of original artwork you can get, sketch covers, a multiple sketch cover where you get 3 or 4, covers that are original art that then link up together. So, I mean, it's pretty impressive.
It's always the continuity always makes things makes or breaks things, I feel, right? Like the accessibility to be able to dive into a series like at any given point and just have that story in that issue or in that episode, it feels like it is lost anymore nowadays.
Well, I mean, if you're really paying attention, you should always think that every comic could be somebody's first. Now, it's a little less true now on characters who have had a major motion picture done, so you do kind of know the basics going in, but you should be able to pick stuff up. You know, certainly if a single issue intrigues you and there's something you're confused about, you can now get it digitally or look things up, or just, you know, what we did is my first Marvel comics actually were, and this is before they were doing continuing stories, but was, I know one was Tales to Astonish 49. It was the issue where Ant-Man became Giant Man. And I'd never seen this hero before. So I'm looking at this and it's all, I read it, enjoyed it, and just thought, I guess this guy was Ant-Man before, whoever Ant-Man was, and now he's big. And it was about the story you were reading then. Mm-hmm. And the other one was, I always forget the number, but A Tales to Suspense, Iron Man versus the Melter. And he's in the big golden suit. And it just had a different feeling to it, which was more personality, is what Marvel was doing with all their heroes. They weren't one note anymore. So even though Darkwing is largely the Silver Age, it certainly gets into that Marvel personality stuff. And that's what made the show, that you care about these characters.
So what was some of your favorite aspects of creating Darkwing Duck? I don't think I had a chance to ask that. Like, what was some of your favorite parts of just the creation of Darkwing Duck?
Well, to me, it's not necessarily the early development. It's watching what people do with the character and then working with them and molding it to whatever I wanted. I mean, sometimes I wrote a few scripts. Sometimes I'd just be rewriting scripts. I'd give heavy notes to story editors who had already given notes to their writers. But the fun was seeing how people developed, giving notes on storyboard and drawing, all of that. I mean, it was just a creative art team and a writing team. And because I'm also an artist and writer, I could help out. I could give notes both ways. And the only thing that was against us, sadly, was how much time we had. You know, not enough money and not enough time. And we didn't have as much time because we didn't have enough money. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are shows that are done today that, you know, people whine about how little time. And it's like, I remember the guys on DuckTales 2017, one of the writers said, "How big was your writer's room?" And I went, "Writer's room? We had no writer's room." Guys would come in, they would pitch a story. I'd see something there or give me an idea. We'd work out kind of what the premise is. They'd go off, you know, write up the premise. I would send it off to whoever needs to okay it. And that was it. We were running. I mentioned to someone yesterday that I had heard that on Tiny Toons and or Animatics, they were allowed to throw out 3 scripts a season. And my jaw dropped because I said, they were allowed to throw out scripts? I mean, basically, we couldn't do that. We just had to, if you didn't think it was, I wish it could be better, you tried to make it better in board and everything you could do, but that had to go. That had, you know, Friday came, it had to be handed out to the art crew so they could read it over the weekend and meet on it on Monday morning with their directors. So, but I gotta say that the stuff I loved was working with all those people and, you know, again, based on stuff I loved.
How was that stress though? Like, I mean, I'm sure that had to create such a strong work ethic to you have this script and no matter what this is going, like you have to make this as good as you can. Like how was that that seems like it'd be a very stressful environment.
Well, it was. I mean, actually Chip and Dale before that was even harder because we had fewer story editors than we should have had. I was actually taken off the show toward the end, and you know, so I didn't finish out the show. They sent me to Florida to recoup, and came back and, you know, working on other things and came up with Darkwing. So it was. All I can say is you do the best you can with what you're doing, and really half the time it's like what studio it goes to. because Darkwing is such a broad show, our Disney Australia studio was fantastic. I mean, they knew short subjects. They would give you full animation. That's just gorgeous. They were a very small studio then. They were constantly expanding, so by the time they got to Goof Troop and Bonkers, they were able to do like 22 episodes for each of those shows out of their 65, and I think I got 7, maybe 8. But the ones that they did, I just loved. The pilot for Darkwing Duck, and I don't mean the 2-parter that explains how he met Goslin. Literally, the first script that I wrote to show the editors and writers, this is what I mean, this is how far you can go, was a show called That Sinking Feeling, and it was animated in Australia, and it came back, and we were all laughing out loud at it. It was so great to see that stuff. And even, I wish I had re-shown that episode to the crew every once in a while, because in the climactic action, there were things, they were in a baseball stadium, and then without explanation, they're suddenly in baseball uniforms and capturing the villain in a pickleball thing back and forth and it was like, we didn't explain where the baseball caps came from or any of that. It was like that kind of broadness that I wanted to keep in the show too. So those are some of my favorite episodes, are the ones that we really play with the format, and we're not traditional Disney storytelling. We're just having fun with it.
What did your guys' brainstorming look like? I know you said it was kind of a rough writer's room, environment for you guys, but like brainstorming these different ideas and episodes,
again, we didn't have a regular writer's room back then. We didn't know what those were. But it was more just trading ideas. I mean, certainly every editor would pitch things to me, and I would give notes then. I'd give notes on the script. And then where we could, every once in a while, we would get together, at lunch or whatever else, and just, actually, I would have liked to have done it more. But just getting reactions on how the villains were. And then feedback was important. They would read each other's scripts. And most importantly, once we cast Jim Cummings as the voice of Darkwing, he loved the character. He and Jeannie McSwain, our casting director and voice director, she and Jim worked together. So she would remind him of something unique he had done in an earlier episode and have him do that reaction instead of some other generic reaction. So things that Jim would stumble on in his improv she would feed back to him. So it became a normal thing. And then those tapes were played, every editor had them. So they started putting, traits of Jim Cummings into the scripts.
That's so cool.
Things like Darkwing goes, yep, that's totally Jim. But then in future scripts, there'd be a yep, in the script. So even though Jim wasn't the voice of Darkwing internationally, obviously, he was still the Darkwing that I fed to my writers and to the storyboard people. That's the performance that they thought of in their minds, and it was a creative feedback loop that was fantastic. So
that's so cool too. The fact that his mannerisms just got picked up and was like, this is Darkwing Duck now. That's such a cool little touch. For everyone that is watching, right here is a link. Be sure to back. I think you only have 3 days left to get all these awesome rewards that we went through. So many hardcovers, commissioned covers. We have remarks, signatures. I mean, there is just a slew of awesome Darkwing Duck merchandise here, and it is all gorgeous. I gotta ask, for anyone that might be on the fence about backing this campaign, if you just had a few seconds to address them, what would you like to say to them?
I just think we'd love to hit 300. We're just shy of 300,000. We'd love to hit that mark to release the last secret level. They hit the 150,000 mark. And when they did that, that's when suddenly everybody will get an ashcan preview of a new Darkwing Duck series that has my cover on it.
Oh, that's cool.
I just think if you're a fan of the show, you go in, at least get a copy of the books. If you've got the money, some of these collector's items, it's original art you're getting. Others are just prints and things. You'll get my signature on a bunch of things. And that's what I do. I mean, I've backed Kickstarters, and it's usually it's like, I want that book, and I'm getting it probably for less money than when it might end up in the comic stores. So that's what I would, say. This is a great collection to get what these guys have done with the stories. And it's like having your own multiple seasons of Darkwing, to carry on.
Mm-hmm. We have a question before we begin to wrap things up. Have you ever played Darkwing Duck, the video game on the NES?
I have not. I don't think.
I don't think I have either.
Day, I might have. Yeah. I mean, that's when he came up, and it was super popular. But not for any great time. Basically, and this was just before that, once video games started adding button combinations to things, I thought it was like, I could keep doing this, but I should probably be writing stuff and drawing stuff instead. So I consciously put aside video games in general. So the simpler games, I would sit down when we had those systems. But that's kind of when I dropped it. Now, Darkwing was one of those simpler games. I don't recall. I mean, I must have tested it out at one point. Somebody must have shown it to me, but it wasn't like, yes, I lost 2 days to Darkwing. No, I lost 2 years to him, doing the show.
So we are getting ready to wrap up, guys. Once again, for the last time, right here is a link to hit up that Kickstarter at 300,000. You said you're unlocking the last stretch goal?
Yeah, exactly. So they want 300,000 or 2,000 backers, I think, is the other number they're looking at. They'd love to have. And then, of course, they're still producing the comics too. So I'm really hoping that everything is successful enough, because what I would like is to see like a 6-issue limited series of each of the Justice Ducks. I'd love to see a supernatural series, and they'd all be very different, because Morgana would be a supernatural adventure. Mm-hmm. And Neptunia would have an undersea adventure, and it could be as wild as you want. It could be the ghost of Davy Jones or something. And Morgana, I mean, we used to play around with the Universal monsters and Lovecraft stuff. I think Morgana could get into Doctor Strange, Steve Ditko worlds, and Neil Gaiman stuff. It's like, give me duck versions of the Endless, just having fun with still playing with what comics have become, and just giving it don't worry about the source material, but let it inspire you to do something real funny and up the adventure. So that's what I'm hoping for.
I love that so much. We have Manuel saying, thank you guys for the interview. Let's get dangerous. Let's get dangerous indeed. We have 2 more questions, and they're usually my favorite questions to ask. I like to ask piece of advice and then what you're consuming outside of creating. So for anyone looking to start their first script, as someone who created such an outstanding series, has worked in so many just series that have touched everybody's soul at one point, I feel, what would be your biggest piece of advice to help them get started on it?
You know what? I really am out of touch with how to break into the animation industry right now. But for any kind of creative writing or script writing for comics or animation, I sometimes give the advice, when you're creating new characters, think of a live action personality that you would like. If you're going to cast that person, think of that, and then write to that voice, because people will not recognize that voice. They're not going to see a word balloon and say, oh, that's Sean Connery from this movie, or that's Ryan Gosling and from Barbie or whatever. But it will help you do a specific voice for those characters. And that's, when it comes to the writing, I want that. I'm looking for a uniqueness of that voice, so that even if they went into a dark room and you just saw the word balloons, you could tell who was talking. And then, of course, I started out as an artist, and to think of comics vocabulary as how you use the panel, how you paste things, all that's, at this point, there's tons of books out there, from Scott McCloud to Michael Bendis, and, putting out books that'll give you guidance. And I say, looking through all of that, there's equally the same number of books about writing for animation. But the main thing is to do it. Now you can, there's no You can self-publish. You can at least try something and show it to your friends, but don't just dream of it and expecting it to happen to you. Start producing stuff, and then you're ready when things do happen to you.
I love that. So outside of, I know it's been a little bit of time since you've been behind the pencil, you just got into retirement not too long ago. What have you been up to? TV shows, movies, comic books, or books? What are you consuming?
I'll say I just bought, and it's right behind me, the entire Sandman collection, because I realized, wait, I've never finished that, because I started buying it in issues back in the day. So I'm enjoying that. I'm just kind of, you call it binging when you just read a lot?
Yeah.
I'm on my third volume since starting it yesterday.
Not bad.
So that, So that happens to be what I'm no longer a Wednesday warrior, to go in and buy comics regularly. I always listen to iFanboy. I always have, and I know those guys, so they keep me up to date and kind of what things are happening. But I do like, a graphic novel or something, a concept, a Kickstarter. I'll see something by a favorite artist or something like that. Someone like that who I say, oh, I want to support him and buy his art book, or, oh, this is a new project I can help get off the ground. Because, it's a whole different business model. Kickstarter really can help a series continue, and including the Darkwing one. It's not just selling these 3 books or whatever. That's going to impact the marketing and how they do continuing adventures. And like I say, I have all sorts of plans for them. What I want to do is I want to brainstorm with Amanda and Jeff and Roger, and then let them do all the hard work. But
yeah,
that's the fun for me.
Hey, nothing wrong with being the man behind the ideas, right? Sit back and let them nail out all the work. So everyone watching, right there are the links. Be sure to support this. If you can't back today, put it on Facebook and Twitter. Word of mouth costs you absolutely nothing. And this is one hell of a series to help get funded at least at $300,000 to unlock that special stretch goal. That being said, it's time for us to wrap up. I hope you all have a lovely Sunday, but most importantly, keep it geekly.